This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 180, one of those nice round numbers we love getting to. Today, we are talking May 2025 financials. I am Craig, your host. Over there, he's Chris. Hey, Chris.
How's it going, Craig?
Yeah, I'm going great, but I've had a sneak peek at what we're talking about today, so I'm not going to ask you the same question. We'll get there in just a moment. But Chris, before we go too far down the road, I'll just remind everybody to go to haulinassetsllc.com for full show notes, including the numbers we're going to be talking about today. The profit and loss statements going back monthly for 6 years are available at haulinassetsllc.com. So if you want to follow along with this journey, wherever you're at in your ownership journey, whether you're an owner-operator, building your fleet, or somewhere in between, that's going to be valuable info. So haulinassetsllc.com. You should also go to motorcarrierhq.com, where you can get the tools, tips, and people you need to make that leap to owner-operator. And you can also get the sweet swag that Chris and I are wearing. I'm in full uniform, Chris.
You are.
You're missing the hat.
You're better dressed than I am, for sure.
Yeah, but you've got the black t-shirt. I've got the gray.
Yeah.
Those watching on YouTube can see the glorious majesty that is the Haulin Assets merch.
Now we just need to get some pants.
That's right. Neither of us are wearing pants because it's YouTube from the waist up, right? So, what was I going to say? haulinassetsacademy.com for the DIY folks out there. You want to self-educate a little bit, that's going to be a great place to do that. All right, Chris, we've got numbers to talk about. We've actually got a lot of stories as well. And so just a programming note, normally we kind of go through all of the tales from the road, but I think there are enough of them this week that are going to be maybe explanatory to some degree, that I thought maybe we save those for the end for the most part. So we'll talk a little bit about what's going on out on the road, but we're also going to save some of that. Now, the one thing that you did mention is it's heating up out there. You guys are driving southern routes a lot.
Yeah.
Right, desert routes.
Getting a lot into Arizona and New Mexico.
And there, I don't know about a therefore, but it sure seems there's a correlation, Chris, if not a causation, in blown tires, right?
It's feeling like that to me. We had a lot of issues this last weekend. One of them was a blown truck tire. I'm feeling like I'm starting to see a little bit of an uptick in blown tires. So I just want to kind of get everybody else's take on this. Does the heat, when you're going into places like Arizona, you're going into places like New Mexico where it's 100 plus degrees, does that have an impact on failure rate on tires? And is there anything, some of our listeners do to kind of help prevent that? I'd love some thoughts and ideas in that realm.
Okay. It has to be a factor, right?
I would think so.
Heat
increases tire pressure, right? And then it also, typically the hotter rubber is, the less...
the more elastic it is.
The more elastic it becomes, and it probably creates faster wear and, that expansion and just, kind of can impact the failure of it.
Welcome to the Haulin Assets Science Hour, where Chris and I pretend that we have any idea about physics.
We're doing a little STEM here.
That's right. There's all those like women in STEM programs. Yeah. Is this the morons in STEM?
No, this is STEM for truckers.
There you go. Yours was a lot nicer
we would
than mine.
Be the morons in STEM, but STEM for truckers.
Love it. Okay, so Chris, like I said, we want to get to some of the other tales from the road in a minute, but on that tire issue, people can find us on Facebook and leave comments there. You can also leave comments directly at haulinassetsllc.com, but genuinely, we'd love to hear from anybody who has some experience or expertise in this area. Let us know.
So if we get some good thoughts or some tips from some of our listeners, that's probably something else we can revisit a little bit later on in a future episode.
Absolutely. Okay, Chris, let's talk numbers and what happened this month, because it was a pretty dramatic swing, and it'll become apparent why if we just start in with I mean, the miles run. But how do you want to intro this? What do you want to? How do you want to tee this topic up?
We started out the year pretty, a little bit better than it has been. The previous 2 years, a stronger start to the year. But then May, we slammed into a freaking brick wall. And it's not really because of the market. It's really more internal factors to Haulin assets. But it's a pretty interesting case study looking at this month versus the previous month. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about the P&L than we typically do and some of the things that cause that to happen. And it really highlights the importance of, I've talked a lot about in the past how, you kind of cover your cost with, we'll say just for a round number's sake, for the first 100,000 miles that the fleet travels. And then that next, the miles over 100,000, or maybe it's the miles over 110,000. That's where the profitability really comes in, and you're going to see that in the numbers this month.
So 110,000,
somewhere between 100 and 110. There's varying factors, so it's not like a hard set number. 100,000 is where we break even, and it changes and it varies per month, and there's a lot of different factors that impact that. But somewhere between that 100 and 110,000 miles is where you kind of break even, and then every mile above that is really what contributes to your income.
Your actual profit.
Yep.
Okay. So with that in mind, with, theoretically 11 trucks in the fleet running, what was the mileage this month?
99,880 miles. So that's the least number of miles we have had in our fleet in well over 2 years. Over 2 years.
Right. And that's basically since we got to 11 trucks.
Right. Yeah. Right around that time. So yeah, it's
so. Now you said there were internal issues, and maybe we can get to some of that stuff in just a moment. But let's keep going with the numbers themselves. So that was the total miles, just under 100K. Deadhead miles, how much are we looking at?
7,985, which is 8% of our total miles.
So creeping
up just a little bit, and we're probably going to see it creep up even more. If you remember right, this time of year, we start to haul some more loads from one of our shippers that are based out of New Mexico, and there's a lot more deadhead involved with those loads than typical loads. So luckily it's built into the pricing to a certain extent. So even though we are increasing in deadhead miles, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not. Okay. Still, the number, as I recall, that you're shooting for is like 5% would be great. 7.5 would be, you're opening your eyes at that point and going, are we in trouble? And you're saying that in this case, it's not a crisis. It's built in, but it is creeping up a little bit.
For sure.
Okay. Total revenue then.
Total revenue was $205,682.73. Again, one of the lower we've seen in the last couple of years.
Because usually it's up closer to what, 250 plus?
Yeah, we've been 220 to 250, and even we've gotten as high as like 270, 280.
Okay.
So 205 is definitely low.
Definitely. All right. So 205. Well, actually, you know what? This is pretty easy math, Chris. Yeah. All right. We're going to do live math here because you're just under 206,000 miles, your dollars in revenue. So 206,000 in revenue with just under 100,000 in miles, driven, which puts you at 206 per mile.
Look at you,
right?
Genius, math genius.
Watch me go. Okay, you're not gonna put one over on this linguistics major. All right, so my math skills are strong.
You nailed it.
Okay, so 206.
Yep, 206, and so that's actually a penny a mile better than last month.
Is it?
It is.
So really, it was the mileage that just killed you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, what does that do then in terms of the profit and/or, as we're talking here, probably a loss?
Yeah, we unfortunately had a loss this month, $27,150.76.
Brutal.
So yeah, brutal. It's basically a $75,000 swing between April and May. And like I said, the interesting thing is our rate per mile was actually slightly higher in May than it was in April. And so that, like I was just saying, that shows how important those extra miles are really to be profitable as a company, you've got to have, that 110, 120,000 plus miles a month range at the size of our fleet and kind of how we operate. That's really where we need to be. Under $100,000, it kills us.
Right. And so you can talk about it on a per truck basis, right? And the per truck mileage requirement is, I imagine, going to be a little different based on the size of your fleet, right? If you've got 100 trucks versus a single owner operator, this number is going to be a little different. But for a 10, 11 truck fleet like you're putting down the road, you're looking for what, 10, 11, maybe 12 per truck if you can get it. Is that right? And you're doing about 9.
We were 9. I did the math. It was like 9,080 miles per truck, which I can't remember having that low of a per truck mileage amount. So, ideally, I would like to see drivers hitting 11,000 miles in a month. Over, you hit 10, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
But we start getting you get a driver that averages less than 10,000 miles a month, and that's
time to have a chat.
Yeah, it's probably time to have a chat.
Yeah. No, I come to road Jesus.
Yeah, there you go.
So with that, was it personnel issues or was it equipment issues? What's the top line thing you attribute to this?
A bunch of different things that really caused it. The biggest being there's kind of two things that were the biggest contributing factors. First, we had 2 drivers that had some pretty significant non-work related injuries that took them out of their trucks for really part of May and even going into a little bit into June. So that, you had those 2 trucks sitting for a good chunk of the month. We also had 2 trucks turn over from drivers. One of the trucks sat empty almost the entire month. The other truck was more like a week, maybe 10 days empty. So yeah, it was rough that way.
That is rough.
Yeah. And then on top of that, we also had, I was kind of talking about our biggest shipper, one of our bigger shippers. They were making a transition. April, May is usually kind of their slower time of the year. So that impacted as well. We weren't getting as many good paying loads from them as we typically do. And so we were kind of having to shuffle things around, operating a little bit different than normal. So that was another pretty big contributing factor to the lower revenue.
Okay. And I'm sure that there are other things as well. Maybe we'll talk about some other factors. Any other personnel issues, or is just a couple of injuries that took people out?
Yeah, those injuries. But then we also had one other driver, really one of our hardest running drivers, took an extended vacation in May. And that, that contributed to the lower number of miles as well.
Which, I mean, that's such a tricky thing as a business owner, because as you just said, this is one of your hardest running drivers. You're not going to begrudge them a vacation.
Absolutely
right?
not. Yeah, well-deserved vacation. I'm not holding that against him in any way, shape, or form. It's just that's the reality of it. It just, he had planned this vacation, like we knew about it months and months in advance. Yeah. So, like, it's nothing to do with him. It's just the timing was unfortunate.
It works out that way sometimes. Yep. Okay, good. So. Let's see. What should we talk about? Some P&L stuff, and then get into some of those tales from the road. We can get into some individual numbers. You said you had a few things that you wanted to bring up. How about maybe we start with fuel? That's something we usually talk about. Yeah,
fuel was 28.5% of revenue, which is kind of. I actually looked at it for the year. That's average. That's
is it?
Right at the average mark.
That's pretty good.
Fuel wasn't really a contributing factor to the low net income. Another one of the things that I actually forgot to put on our notes that was, definitely part of it is, we talk about this regularly. May was a month where we had 5 payrolls. So there were 5 Fridays, 5 payrolls.
Always.
So that increased it quite a bit. So that was definitely a contributing factor.
That's, we're talking a 20-25% increase in payroll expense for a month. That's massive. And as we've been talking about for years, payroll is your biggest expense. That and fuel, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's a killer. And gosh, that does make a lot of sense. Without that, you still probably wouldn't have been profitable, but it wouldn't have been as big a red hit as you got, right?
Yep, exactly. It wouldn't have been.
Okay. What about repairs and maintenance?
So again, quite a bit higher than normal, or at least, especially what we kind of went from, adjusting kind of what our new normal was to, for the last few months, we've actually had a little bit under that normal and maintenance and repairs expenses. But May took a big spike. Like we had way above our normal, what's kind of our new normal, almost $30,000 in maintenance and repairs. If you remember, I think it was the last episode, we talked about 2 clutches going out. It was either the last one or so one of the clutches was covered under warranty. The other one was not. There was a tow bill associated with that. We ended up just kind of because, I talked a little bit about how one of them took like 10 plus days, almost 2 weeks.
That's
I think
right.
It was just about 2 weeks to get it fixed.
That's right, up in the Northwest.
Yeah. So we ended up renting a truck for that one. And so there's several $1,000s of truck rental expense that I've put in that repairs maintenance category. So it was just a huge month as far as maintenance and repairs go.
When it comes to maintenance and repairs, if you don't mind me pausing on this topic for a moment, is there math out there? And if not, would it be worth it to find it or create it that kind of breaks down, all right, you buy a new truck and here's the annual expected expenditure on repairs and maintenance for the life of that truck, 10, 15 years, however long you plan on having it, where you can now break it down annually what you should expect. So that the reason I bring this up is you've got 11 trucks in the fleet and you've got a couple of good months of, hey, this repairs and maintenance bills are lower than normal. But you talked, this was a long time ago, many, many moons ago, Chris, you brought up the whole Joseph of Egypt thing, right? You gotta sock some stuff away to prepare for the lean times. Do you think you can get that granular? And do you think it matters to say, like, we need to have this much to cover what is going to be coming now that we've had 2 or 3 months of decent repairs and maintenance bills?
You do. And I've talked a little bit about this too, as, especially when it comes to calculating our cost per mile. We typically put, and most fleets are going to calculate their maintenance and repairs expense as a per mileage expense, because that's one of those things that's really, it's kind of a variable cost. The more you use the truck, the more maintenance and repair expense you have. The less you use the truck, the less it's going to break down and less issues you're going to have. And so typically we call it a cost per mile, and that's usually somewhere, give or take, depending on the age of the vehicle and whatnot, 20-ish cents a mile roughly. I think I've seen it as low as about 15 cents a mile, as much as 23 or 24 cents a mile. So it kind of depends. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good to know. Let's see. Other bullet points. You mentioned the tow bill. Did you mention renting a truck? You said you rented a truck. Yeah, that's got to be huge.
200, renting a truck is going to be $250 a day.
Plus mileage. And I can't remember exactly what we spent per mile. I want to say it's like 20 cents a mile. What would be the difference? I'm putting you on the spot here, so you're welcome to punt and say, I'll do the math on that. But what's the difference between, let's say you've got a truck that might sit for a week versus, renting a truck to replace it? What's the difference between just letting it sit and renting it? Is it that you're trying to take as little a hit as possible? Is it that you're trying to keep your driver out on the road, keep them happy? Your direct shippers, what's the calculus there?
That's a good question. Usually if you look at it just strictly from a cost benefit analysis, you're probably better off just sitting. The reason in this situation we decided to rent the truck was we had a load that we really felt like we needed to get delivered, and we wanted to keep our driver happy. Because if you are going to have a driver sit that long, especially when it's away from home, like they're not going to be happy if they're not getting compensated at all. So you're probably, even if they're just sitting, you're going to be paying them something.
Right.
And so, all that you need to look at, and every situation's a little bit different. When we have a situation like this, we treat it truly as a, every situation is treated differently. We look at the situation, decide what makes the most sense. And in this situation, we felt like it was better to rent.
Right. It sounds like short term, it might be better monetarily, but long term, relationship wise, you don't want to take that kind of a hit.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. Other bullet points from the profit and loss statement.
I think that's it.
Okay. All right. So what the heck was going on out there this month, Chris? Well, and I guess that was May. We're well into June now.
Yeah.
Tales from the road. I wanted to save some of these because are these going to affect what you and I talk about next month?
Yeah, they're gonna affect June's numbers for sure. And it's kind of interesting because they're going to have an impact, but part of that impact is just going to be a lot of what happened caused further delays in deliveries. And so, if we're expecting to deliver a load today, but now we can't deliver it till tomorrow, it's not changing your revenue. It's not changing what you're going to get paid. It's just delaying that. And so, instead of making, an extra $1,000 for that day in revenue, you're not going to make that. And so, if you've essentially got 7 or 8 trucks that are having that problem, then that's, $7,000 or $8,000 a day in revenue you're not going to get.
Right.
And, it has this big impact. And so breakdowns over the weekend are tough because depending on the breakdown, and it seems like the breakdowns that we had in this situation were all ones that required parts that we couldn't get parts for until Monday. And so we ended up having to sit a few of our trucks over the weekend. I think 3 trucks had to sit because we couldn't get parts.
Sitting for a whole weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot.
One of them was because of a coolant leak. One of them was for a radiator, so 2 coolant leaks, and one of them was for an air leak.
Speaking of driving through the desert on hot tires,
yeah,
you get that radiator better be working.
Got it. Yeah, it's not good. The truck's not going to go very far if it doesn't have coolant.
Well, okay, that's brutal then. So when you look ahead into the future, do you expect a June similar to your May, or with the 4 pay periods in June, maybe that'll make it? I think
the 4 pay periods in June, all of the trucks are running with drivers, so that's a big, good thing for June. One of them was, it took about part of that driver turnover. That truck was sitting for half of June. And here's kind of one of the other unfortunate situations is one of the drivers that blew the tire. So here's a situation. We weren't waiting for parts, but he had a blown tire, brand new driver. This was his very first load.
No way.
Yeah. Blows a tire. And it was one of those where there's no extra room. It was only from Utah to like 500-mile run. So a short run, and a short run for us. But it used a lot of times in those situations, there's not much extra time built into that load.
Right.
And so just kind of the way everything worked, it was a couple hours to get the repair done, and that was just long enough that he missed his delivery. And guess, of course, this was a Walmart, Walmart won't, there's like no fudge factor with the Walmart load. And so he would have been like an hour and a half late to the Walmart delivery, and Walmart wouldn't reschedule for like 2 full days. And so all that just creates a cause and effect that just kind of keeps.
It's a cascade.
It's a cascade. Yeah, right. That's the word I'm looking for. Look at you go. English, math, you got everything going on today.
What can I say, Chris? I'm so well educated.
You are well educated.
Now look at me know how to run a trucking company. Oh, no, that's why we have you here.
But this cascade effect of can't drop off that load. So that means we have to cancel another load. And we had that happen with a ton of loads over the weekend. It's just super frustrating and difficult to deal with, and frustrating for us, frustrating for drivers, frustrating for our customers. It was a bit of an overwhelming weekend. I
can sense that. And in fact, this is a great advertisement for our YouTube channel. Which, by the way, even if I imagine most people are listening in their trucks, they're on the road, and so that's fine. It's available for those who would like it. But even if you're more of a podcast listener, go like and subscribe. Boost our numbers on YouTube because that helps other people find us. So that would be greatly appreciated for this free product that we put out for all of you. But I was going to say, this is a great advertisement for YouTube because the moment we started these cameras, Chris, if somebody was watching and paying attention and seeing your body language, they'd have known exactly what was coming on this episode. And they're going to know next time, too, before I ever ask, how did this month go? It like people could see you this month just kind of like wilting in your seat a little bit.
Yeah.
Long weekend, long month, bad numbers. I'm trying to keep it light, but woof. That's a rough month.
It's a reality of trucking. It's a reality of business. Like you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have your highs and lows. And, May was definitely a low month. It was tough.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I guess we'll see how it goes in June when we come back with numbers in a couple of episodes. Chris, any last thoughts to leave our audience with today?
I think that about wraps it up.
Okay. Well, then I'll just remind everybody, I'll skip most of the housekeeping stuff. If you've stayed this long, then you know what I'm going to say. But I'll remind everybody about Facebook. We do want to hear about the hot tire issue. So find us on Facebook. Go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com and let us know what your experience has been or what knowledge you can drop on us. That would be much appreciated. Otherwise, thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next time.
See you then.